You're listening to Physician Non-Clinical Careers, episode number 316. Why the mid-career physician must achieve financial freedom. In this week's show, I have the pleasure of talking with a physician who has been educating other physicians since around 2007. So stick around if you'd like to be inspired and instructed by the wealthy doc himself. But first, we must thank our wonderful sponsor. The University of Tennessee offers the longest running and most highly respected physician-only executive MBA in the country. In fact, it's produced more than 700 graduates. The Haslam College of Business at the UT was recently ranked #1 in the world by Economist magazine as the most relevant executive MBA program. And unlike most other programs, it only takes 1 year to complete. Graduates have taken leadership positions at major healthcare organizations and have become entrepreneurs and business owners. So if you want to acquire new business and management skills and advance your non-clinical career, then contact Dr. Kate Ashley's office by calling 865-974-6526 or simply use our handy link at nonclinicalphysicians.com/physician MBA. All right, non-clinical nation, I'm very pleased to share my conversation with Dr. Brian Foley, also known as the Wealthy Doc. He has been educating medical students and physicians on all kinds of money issues since around 2007 at wealthydoc.org. Dr. Foley received his medical degree at the Upstate Medical University of the State University of New York and later completed his physical medicine and rehabilitation residency at Ohio State University College of Medicine. He's board certified in physical medicine and rehab and electrodiagnostic medicine. In 2006, he completed his traditional MBA in finance at the Indiana University Kelley School of Business. He continues to write a well-known blog called, as I said earlier, Wealthy Doc at wealthydoc.org and has recently released a book titled Wealthy Doc's Guide to Achieving Financial Freedom. All right, let's meet our guest. Today's guest is a fellow online educator, but in his case, he uses a blog to help educate physicians and other clinicians about finances, investing, and other important topics. I've been following him for years, but when he published his book recently, I knew it was time to invite him onto the podcast. So let's welcome Dr. Brian Foley to the show. Hello, Brian.
Hey, thanks. I'm honored to be here. I have a lot of respect for you and your work, John. I've been following you for a long time, enjoy your podcast, and I've had many friends and colleagues on your podcast, so I'm glad to finally be included.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear that. But we're just among friends here, so I thought I could pick your brain. And basically, what I think, the way I look at it is my listeners, for the most part, are either just interested in learning something new about careers or about finances. They may be burned out. They may just be frustrated, maybe looking for a new career. But I think there's a lot of things you can teach us today that our listeners will benefit from. So I appreciate you being here today.
Yeah, I hope to help.
All right. Now, we usually start with just kind of getting a little bit of background. I do have a little intro that I will record separately before we actually, start talking. But I'd like to get your version of a little bit of what you think is important about your background and how you came to create the blog and write the book and all that kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah, I grew up rather poor, which becomes relevant when I talk about these financial issues. Kind of a loving family in upstate New York. So pretty, when I say New York, people think of the city, but it's really quite rural.
Hmm.
And I was interested in science and I like people. So like a lot of people that go into medicine are trying to figure out how to combine those two interests. So I was a chemistry major. I thought I'd be a scientist, but then I realized one, I'm not that great at it, and two, I didn't want to live in a lab. A lot of my friends were pre-med, and I just learned more about it and went with that route. So after medical school, I specialized in physical medicine and rehab. And that's kind of a wide field. It's one that a lot of even doctors don't know much about. But briefly, the inpatient work is with spinal cord injury, head injury, traumatic brain injury, things like that. I do more of the outpatient, which is musculoskeletal, kind of non-operative orthopedics, nerve testing. We overlap a little bit with anesthesia pain, things like that. Um, and and like a lot of PM&R docs, especially, I think tend to have a lot of outside interests. And so I was always interested in a lot of things, reading, writing, different kinds of career and business. Um, and after meeting a lot of physicians who weren't really making a lot of good financial decisions and were a little bit overconfident maybe in their burgeoning skills, I decided to get an MBA. So I specialized in finance and the MBA, and that became very helpful in my own life and in helping fellow colleagues as well.
That's a lot. I want to reflect on a couple things. There's a picture of your house in the book, by the way, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But so that'll give the listeners and the readers an idea of what you're talking about in terms of the starting out in a, in a more of a poverty situation. And I'm just thinking of things where I can relate to you. So I was a chem major too. So go chemistry.
Right. All right.
I actually worked as a food scientist for 2 years before finally getting into med school. But
Yeah, I worked for 1 year at DuPont actually.
did you?
So
Okay.
yeah,
See, that
yeah,
came in handy, didn't it?
yes, yes,
It comes in handy every day, actually, if you think about it.
it does.
All right. So, and I really love physiatrists. They were one of my most, as a family physician, I worked in occupational medicine. Nobody could help me out better than a physiatrist when I couldn't get someone feeling better. So, and you're still doing that, right? You're practicing full time,
That's good to hear. I'm part-time. Yeah,
part time.
part-time.
Okay. Now you
Yep.
decided along the way to do a little segue or a little squeeze in a little MBA. Now that's not typically, especially the school you went to, is very well known.
Mhm.
And so tell us how you managed to fit that in and balance that with what you were doing clinically.
Yeah, I didn't realize how unusual my path was, but the North American Spine Society asked me to give a talk in Toronto to the spine surgeons mostly about my background because they said, well, they've been looking around, they haven't really found anybody who's a physician who has a business degree, who worked in private practice, who worked in academia, and who is employed physician, salaried and nonprofit. And I've done all three. I was in private practice for about 5 years, and then I went into academia. And at that time, I found out that when you're on the faculty, the school will pay for your tuition.
Perfect.
And so I said, does that count even the MBA? Because per credit, that's a lot more. And they said, yeah, it doesn't matter if. So I had a friend who's a colleague. I don't know if he's smarter than I am or not, but he chose wine tasting as his choice every semester, semester after semester. Yeah, so I did my MBA instead. So that was a great opportunity for me because in academia it was a pretty light schedule and there's a lot of flexibility. So in the evenings I was already on campus, so I did it in person kind of hardcore. Full MBA was 3 years, the evenings and weekends, so it was definitely a lot of work, but I really got a lot out of that and I enjoyed it.
Well, you answered a question a lot of times I get, and that's, should I get an MBA? Do I need to get something like that? And my answer usually is, it's great if you can do it, but get your employer to pay for it if at all possible. Why go
Yeah,
spend $60,000
yeah,
or whatever it might be? Now, my podcast is sponsored by an MBA program at the University of Tennessee, so I definitely am not
right.
going to badmouth the idea.
Yeah, there's a lot of benefits to that formal training if you have the interest. Now, I did it mainly because I have an interest. I actually gave a talk at a White Coat Investor annual conference on that very topic. Should physicians get an MBA? And if I had to pick one word, I would say no. But it's mainly because if you go to a talk and someone says don't do it, and that talks you out of doing it, then you probably didn't have enough motivation to get yourself through it because it's a lot of work. But I think if you have interest and you want formal training, it was helpful to me. I mean, the job I have now was from that, directly from that. I was recruited because of my business training, and it's helped me be more rigorous in my own financial investments and advice to others. Gives me credentials, it opens up doors for speaking and writing. So it's very, very helpful for those who are interested and can pull it off.
Okay, then I'm going to ask one other question that's kind of related to that, and let's see what your answer is here. Let's say that I happen to have the opportunity to get the MBA during or immediately after med school, or should I go wait and do the executive MBA, which I think basically is what typically we would call what you did and what others.
Mhm.
What's your answer to that question?
Well, technically, mine was not the executive MBA, but the executive MBA, I think, is a more brief, kind of accelerated version, especially in healthcare. If they take advantage of your healthcare experience, they might be a year and a half. So it's maybe more
Uh,
expensive, but less of a time commitment. So there's pros
okay.
and cons to different MBA programs. When to do it, I think a lot of these decisions are very personal. What's going on in your life? What's your situation? From a pure financial standpoint, I would say, okay, start your medical career. That's the way I did it. Or do an MD MBA if you have that option. That's a really, really affordable and good time to do it when you're a starving student. You're studying anyway. You add on an extra semester or a year even, and you come out with dual degrees. That's a nice option. A lot of my colleagues have done that. But later in life, I think you can afford it. You can take time off, do it on weekends, and add to your credentials. Now, most people who get an MBA just across the country, not physicians, but all people who get MBAs, generally look for an income boost, and generally they do get a very significant boost. For physicians, that isn't necessarily the case.
Mm,
So I think we have to be very focused on, well, what exactly do I want from that degree? Could I get those skills and talents in some other fashion? If I want to learn negotiation, if I want to learn finance, there's a lot of ways online, some of them even for free. So there's actually a book and a website called the No Pay MBA. So there's a lot of online sources. For me, I need formal structure in the school and the class to go to. It's just how I learn best personally. But there's a lot of options out there.
Now, it sounds like you had a lot of interest in finance and, investing and planning for the future and so forth. But if I remember correctly, you did finish the MBA before you started the blog or somewhere in
Yes.
there. I have a feeling you could have probably started before that, but anyway, that's what the way it was. So tell us now, what's going on with the blog? I mean, you've been doing that a long time. There is a lot of information, when I look at it that, I mean, basically just tons of free information, not just blog posts, but I mean like how to and other things. So tell me more about the blog so people understand what they might get from that.
Great. Great. Thanks for your compliment. I appreciate that. So I started the blog really to help the students and residents that I was working with. They were really interested in finances, and they're overwhelmed with how much they have to learn just to be a good doctor. So they couldn't sit down and read textbooks in finance, even if that were an interest of theirs. At the
Mhm.
time, this was 2007 when I started it. So there were blogs that started a few years earlier, but it was still kind of fledgling. And the students would say, "Well, the books you recommend are great, but like, is there a website I can go to?" And at the time, I searched, and there wasn't really. Bill Bernstein had posts, Efficient Frontier, that he wrote starting in 1998 that I followed, but it was really only on investing. It was very technical, so it wasn't helpful to the residents. So I started this really to help them, and I just added, as I add content and have thoughts. I'll put that in, and a lot of attendings have told me that's helpful. And then that I also gave lectures, and it kind of spun off from there to give public speaking and eventually the book.
Okay. Now I remember, if I remember again, haven't read every page of the blog, but I mean, there's stuff about like insurance, there's stuff about investing, and then you get a little bit into real estate. Actually, a lot of this is covered in the book. I'm assuming some of it's, you've written about before as well. So tell us more about just kind of the smattering of different types of related topics you might cover.
Yeah, so I try to focus mostly for physicians or other high earners who don't know a lot about finance. So probably 80 to 90% of it is really basic finance. It's true for anyone, helpful to anyone. But some of it is specific to physicians, starting late, maybe being overconfident, over trusting, having a lot of debt, those kind of things that resonate a lot with physicians. I have several posts that are just overview of the basics, and then how to structure the overview, thinking of personal finance but then I do deep dives into disability or other things that may interest the readers as well. So hopefully there's something for everyone if you search in there.
Now, just because I have a different perspective in terms of, talking to a lot of physicians that are frustrated and find that medicine isn't exactly what they thought it was going to be. Doesn't mean they don't want to continue to do it in some fashion, but it's just there's a lot of unrest and dissatisfaction. So I was toying with calling today's episode of the podcast "Why the Mid-Career Physician Must Achieve Financial Freedom." And so I put that question to you, and I mean I have my own ideas, but I feel like it's important that a mid-career physician do achieve financial freedom. And so maybe you can give me your thoughts on why that might be, and then we can talk about some of the simple things we should probably do to achieve that.
Yes, I agree completely with you. I'm not sure I hear that a lot, but I think we probably should hear it more. And a lot of physicians don't have a lot of interest or experience in finance, and a lot of them are very confident, especially starting out at 30, 35 years old. Hey, I have a good income. I love my career. Why should I care about finance? I have a money guy for that. And I want to delegate it.
Right. Right.
In my in my answer, and this is what I would tell my 30-year-old self. I'm in my mid 50s now. I would tell my 30-year-old self, okay, but I'm glad you love it. I'm glad you're good at it. I'm glad it's a nice career. But work may change. Your regulatory environment may change. Instead of having private practice, maybe you're working for a big company. You won't always agree. Maybe you'll run into some health crises, or you need to take time off for your spouse. Maybe your interest will change. You'll find, hey, I'm really more interested in the psychology and psychiatry than I am in my interventional things that I'm doing. So, I toured a lot of names for my blog. At one point, I thought maybe FI by 50 was a title. FI is financial independence, meaning you don't necessarily need to work to cover your expenses.
Hmm.
And that's what I recommend for most physicians. Now, I started out age 31, and at age 48, I was financially independent. That's about 17 years. The numbers say that if you save somewhere between 30, 35, 40% of your gross income, that's about 50% or half of your net income, in 17 years will be financially independent. Now, I never had a fixed savings rate, but it worked out about that in the end. So for some, especially physician couples that have two incomes, or you're married to an attorney with a high income, some people just save one and live on the other. And, by 50, you'll be independent. Now, does that mean you have to quit your work? Absolutely not. But what I found is it gave me the confidence to say, you know what, at 50, I'm going to go part-time. So I do 3 days a week clinical now, and I've done that for the last 6 years, and that's been wonderful. Now, physicians think that they don't have the clout to negotiate, especially for a big employer like I work for, a $3 billion, 8 hospital system. But being financially independent gave me a little boost of confidence to say, I can do this. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And they said, oh, yeah, I would love to have you in any capacity, of course, to replace a physician whose experience and good with the system is very expensive to them. And so they're willing to help. So for that reason, I think it's great to be financially independent, to give yourself options.
Yeah, absolutely. See, again, because I have a biased view, I'm talking to people that are burned out and so forth. It's like I think a lot of the specialties that we are in, they're interesting. They're could be very exciting, but they can be draining. I mean, to practice 20,
Mhm.
25 years, doing something intense with long hours, you don't realize, that stamina doesn't always persist. And if you're not financially free or already set in some fashion, then you really start to feel trapped. And like you said, if you do have the financial freedom and you decide you want to keep working, like you said, 3 to 5 days a week, whatever it might be, you don't have that burden anymore that, you don't have options.
I agree completely. And, I didn't, if you had asked me, are you burned out at 50, let's say, I would have said, no, I love what I do. But I cut back. And after looking back, I thought, I have a fellow friend blogger, and he has this blog called Crispy Doc. He was a little bit crispy.
Crispy,
He
yeah.
wasn't burned out. And,
Yeah.
and that's kind of how I felt looking back. So I love my job. I love my clinical work, but I will say I do love it a lot more now that I do less of it. And I'm less dependent on it. And I'm a lot more willing to mentor and teach. And I even have meetings on my day off that, I really enjoy it more now that I'm not, forced to be on that treadmill counting every WRVU and worried about covering overhead while I'm on vacation and things like that that add stress that you may not even realize until it's gone.
Now, all of these things I think are covered in the book, right? And how to achieve that and how do you get more income. I wanted to get a little deeper into that particular topic. You brought it up about how you were able to get a little more leverage, but I think you go in the book a little more detail. So, what kind of things can a physician do to get more income without changing their career or moving to another facility or something?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot that physicians can do on the front end, especially. That's the best time to negotiate your job
Mm,
is before you sign up. You once you set that track, that salary, if you're at that same institution for a long time, it's really tough to have a big change, 20, 50% increase in, but before you start and they really want you there, that's a great time. You have a lot more leverage than you realize. So I think learning some basics of contract negotiation or getting someone to help you with reviewing your contract, knowing your value in the marketplace, looking at surveys. There's a lot of them out there now, AMGA, MGMA, Sullivan Cotter online, Medscape, Doximity, there's
wow. Yeah, that's a
PayScale
lot.
and Salary.com. Look at all those for your specialty and get an idea and talk to your friends and colleagues if you have a few that are willing to talk to you about salary and options, so that you're going into that, getting your value because there's a lot of variation within the chosen specialty that you have. Some people feel like, well, I'm in this, X specialty or I'm primary care and my income is limited. And there's some truth to that for sure, but there's a lot of leeway in negotiation. So I think anything, if you do a workshop in negotiation, you don't need a law degree or MBA to learn some basics from negotiation. That will help you a lot. The second point I would say is, we're talking about income, and that's great. I'll talk, a lot about that if you want me to. But reducing your expenses is the best way for physicians to get ahead, in my opinion. They don't always want to hear that, but most doctors overspend, in my opinion. And it's easier to cut your expenses. There's tax advantages to doing that. If you're already making 200,000, 250, 300,000, you're in the top 5%, maybe 3%, 10%, depending on where you live and what you do.
Hmm.
So getting that extra 20, $30,000, if that takes you a lot of work, a lot of risk, a lot of stress, may not be the best way to achieve your goal. And thirdly, I was really sold on the idea of multiple streams of income early on. And this passive income is maybe not the best phrase for it, but latent income, recurrent income, horizontal income, something like that, where you put out a book or a course or a project, and you continue to get income, or you buy a bond or a stock, a dividend paying stock, or invest in a private company, and that continues to produce income. Real estate, obviously, a great choice for a lot of physicians. Produces ongoing income and capital appreciation. Those are great ways to boost income without doing the extra labor as well.
Do you have a favorite since you brought up real estate? So, there's a lot of ways to invest in real estate. It's not always as easy, it's not always passive. But what about you? Do you have a particular preference when it comes to using real estate as part of your overall approach to maintaining that income?
I do. I've been an investor in real estate my whole career, which is basically 25 years as a physician. I will say clearly, emphatically, it is absolutely not required. It's very popular right now. There's a lot of blogs and conferences, and it's a booming market, and a lot of docs are interested for very good reasons. But realize it is not required. And everybody from Harry Markowitz, who started modern portfolio theory, to Warren Buffett, to the Vanguard founder, Jack Bogle, all say a mix of stocks and bonds is all you need. So you can do investing simply as a physician without any difficulty. But having said that, if you want to add real estate, I do think it makes sense. It's a separate asset class, so it doesn't always go up and down when stocks and bonds go up and down. You can buy it fairly easily and passively as a REIT, REIT, Real
Mhm.
Estate Investment Trust. So from companies like Vanguard, Fidelity, TIA, CREF, they all sell these that you can just buy in. You don't have a tenant to worry about. AAA leases are a little more involved, but they're still kind of passive. I've invested in medical office buildings, surgery centers. Some physicians have options for hospitals. I've owned several single family homes as rental units. And now I'm doing more funds and syndications and apartment buildings, things like that. The benefits are many, but appreciation, so these assets tend to grow over time. Depreciation, which is a tax benefit to physicians. Then you can write off some expenses and then you get some cash flow coming in. So there's a lot of arguments to get involved if you have some interest.
Yeah, it sounds like start with the simpler ones perhaps, and unless you're
Hmm.
going to invest a lot of into, time. I mean, I guess you can invest. I'm not investing in a syndicate, for example, but it sounds very attractive. And when I hit retirement, if I'm getting some kind of cash outs from real estate, or I'm a part owner in a urgent care network, blah, blah, blah,
Hmm.
well, then I might have a bunch of cash. I would consider it, but I would definitely have to really dig into to learn about those. But they sound like is an interesting option.
Yeah, and for those who don't want to, I think funds are another option somewhere between REITs and syndication. So a fund is a private, usually have to be an accredited investor, which almost all physicians are if they work and make $200,000 an individual or $300,000 a couple or have $1 million in assets, you can be eligible for a fund. And they buy multiple properties, usually in multiple regions of the country, so you have more diversification. Syndications are a very concentrated investment in one facility, and so you're
Mm,
susceptible to economic changes, to fraud, and there's a lot of risks. So you really have to be pretty knowledgeable I think, and I'm a little wary. There's a lot of physicians jumping into syndications without really
it's
understanding
true.
what it is, and they've gone really well in the past, but that doesn't mean they're going to continue.
I think the pandemic threw things for a loop for a while there. I don't know if they've recovered from
Mhm.
that or not at this
They
point, but
did, yeah. I was lucky. I had some single family homes at the time, but everybody was able to pay the rent. I didn't have to worry about eviction, but I was lucky.
nice.
If you have just, one or two rental houses and you lose your tenants, you can be really hurting. So that's the argument for having a small investment in a larger property with a group of other people. You get a little more protection there.
Good advice. Yeah. You always got to be diversified and protect
Yeah,
yourself, and also do your research. Okay, I want to first I don't think we mentioned the website's address. Maybe you did, but it's wealthydoc.org, right?
that's correct. If you go to wealthydoc.com, you'll be diverted to the .org.
Okay. Cool. And like I said, we talked a little bit about what's on there. But now tell us more about the book in terms of why should I buy the book and where should I buy it? Oh, here's the
Yeah, I
book for
wrote the
those watching. There we go.
yeah, I wrote the book for those who are starting out in practice. So basically, I wrote it for my 30-year-old self, the
Hmm.
things I wish I had known that would kind of set me on the right track for the future. I tried to make it pretty readable. I had a lot of help. Writing a book is a lot harder than it seems it should be. To make it readable, I put in some personal stories about what I've been through. Tried to share some tips from School of Hard Knocks. If you just want straight up good financial advice, you can go to the Personal Finance for Dummies series or something like that. But if you're interested in, a fellow physician who's doing his best to be honest and teach what he has learned, it's a good source for that. It's not the only one out there, but I wanted to put my voice in the mix.
Well, I think too, because it's from the physician's perspective, we all kind of go through the same things, more or less. I mean, everyone's, path is a little different, but we all put things off while we're in our training. Most of us have loans we have to deal with. And it's just so that I think it's kind of, as I read through it, it's just flows naturally. Oh yeah, this is what I needed then, and then later on I needed this, and so I definitely recommend it. You can get it at Amazon, like you said, very easy, and it's easy to read, and it's probably not 600 pages. It's not a scientific It's
Mhm.
an actual good advice and information. And, I think it didn't hurt that you got the MBA along the way to talk about some of the slightly more technical things.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Any advice you have for us before we go? I guess we're running out of time here in terms of, just if knowing a little bit about my audience, they might be in the middle career, since that's what we were focusing on. Mid career, feeling a little frustrated, a little helpless. I don't know what advice you have for them in general and regarding their finances.
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of time for hope. There's a lot of resources out there now, like websites and blogs and podcasts like yours, groups on, Facebook and other social media outlets can bring people together, physicians to collaborate on, what's a good side gig and how do you benefit from, it didn't talk about the tax benefits, but having a little bit of side income can help. You can have a solo 401k or a SEP IRA to put aside a little bit more money there. And you can write off some of your expenses, as well as having a creative outlet outside of medicine can sometimes, even if you're going to continue, like my blog, I mean, I really enjoy the creative writing outside, whether it's financially successful or not. And that helps me feel a little bit rejuvenated when I go back to my career. If you're thinking about another career outside of medicine, my advice is to dabble in it while you're a physician. And I certainly did a lot of that. If you can cut back a little bit, maybe drop a call or cut back a half day here and there and add some moonlighting, daylighting. Some of the things that I have done, despite my, saying increasing your income isn't the way to go, I did find benefits of doing that. Some examples, since because I think a lot of your audience may be interested in some of those. I've
Mhm.
done IMEs. I've done some medical consulting for investment banks. I've
Mhm.
had 5 or 6 different medical directorships. I've done some medical informatics where I taught fellow physicians how to use our EMR well. There's paid surveys, file reviews. Lawyers and insurance companies and state workers' comp boards are really interested in physicians and input and want to pay them. They realize they make good money and they want to. There's opportunities for coaching your peers. Once you learn something, you're a little bit ahead of someone else. You don't need to be the world's best expert, but just being a little ahead of your peers, you can give other people hope and encouragement and show them how. Next thing you know, you'll be doing what I'm doing, paid speaking and teaching and writing, and it can open up a whole new world. And then if you find, hey, I love this better, and I'm making a good income, then you can transition maybe a little bit earlier out of medicine.
Yeah, I like that the coaching, the lecturing, speaking, and so forth. For particularly, I think like where you're combining, what you know about medicine, and then about, in your case, finances, and where those two things meet. And so there's this whole audience of people that haven't gotten there yet that just want to learn something, either face to face or in written format or whatever. And so that's a great side business.
Yeah, I agree. And if I can be of help to anyone, please feel free to reach out. If you go to my website, there's a contact section. You can email me. I don't have any paid services. I'm not here to make money off my colleagues, but I'm glad to share what I know.
And they can reach out at LinkedIn too, I believe. Is that possible?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, but most of the social media platforms out there.
Okay. Excellent. Well, we are out of time now, so we could go on for hours. I think I've only touched on like 3 chapters in the book, if that. So, but no, I really appreciate you being here today, Brian. This is very useful and educational, and I encourage everyone to get the book and follow up with you if they have questions.
Thanks, John. My pleasure.
All right. I hope to see you again sometime and maybe get you back on the podcast. And with that, I'll say goodbye.
That'd be great. I'll see you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
I'm glad that Brian was able to share just a small amount of his wisdom with us today. Until I booked him for today's show, I really didn't realize that he actually started educating clinicians 17 years ago. So if there are any money issues that you don't feel comfortable with, you definitely want to start by reading Dr. Foley's book. Now, you can find his book on Amazon by searching for Guide to Achieving Financial Freedom. Or I think if you search for Dr. Brian Foley, Foley, you'll find it as well. I'll put a link to the Amazon page in the show notes. Now, Brian indicated to me that he can be found on LinkedIn as well. Particularly if you'd like to connect and clarify anything we talked about today, you can do that. And don't forget that his website is full of free financial education. Again, that's at wealthydoc.org, O-R-G, not .com. You can find the show notes for today's episode and all the links mentioned at nonclinicalphysicians.com/midcareer-physician. Remember that this podcast is made possible by the support of the University of Tennessee Physician Executive MBA program. You can learn more about that at nonclinicalphysicians.com/physician MBA. It's all one word. As usual, some of the links that I refer you to and that you may find in the show notes are affiliate links. So I get a payment from the seller if you purchase the affiliate item using my link. The price of the item is no different. I have no affiliate links related to my interview with Brian Foley today. The opinions expressed here are mine and my guests. And while the information provided on the podcast is true and accurate to the best of my knowledge, there's no guarantee that using the methods discussed will lead to success in your career, life, or business. So always consult an attorney, accountant, or career counselor or strategist before making any major decision about your career. Now, please join me next Tuesday as I present my interview with Dr. Karen Barnard, an endocrinologist who now coaches physicians full-time. We'll learn her approach and find out how her clients overcome their biggest challenges. See you then.